want to start with something that might sound impossible at first because when you hear the name Amazon, you think Seattle. You think of the glass spheres downtown, the headquarters that transformed an entire city, the culture that defined a generation of tech workers. But what I'm about to tell you is that within 18 months, the gravitational center of North American e-commerce quietly shifted 500 miles north, and the consequences are landing in your mailbox right now, in your delivery delays, in the prices you're paying, and in the jobs disappearing from communities that thought they were too big to fail. What officially happened is straightforward enough. Amazon announced it would be opening new fulfillment centers in Vancouver and Toronto. Just another expansion, or so it seemed. The press releases used the usual language about serving customers better, about growth and opportunity. But if you stopped there, you would miss the most important corporate relocation of the decade. You would miss why one of the most powerful companies in human history decided that the country that built it could no longer be trusted to house it. And you would miss how a trade war that was supposed to punish Canada ended up punishing American workers, American consumers, and the entire infrastructure of American retail. Let me be clear about what actually set this in motion. For years, Trump has had a very public, very personal vendetta against Amazon and its founder. He has called the company a tax cheat, accused it of destroying American retail, blamed it for the decline of newspapers, and attacked it relentlessly on social media. But the breaking point came when his administration did something almost unprecedented. They imposed what they called a border processing fee, $15 per package on every single parcel shipped from Canada into the United States. The stated reason was border security and customs enforcement, but everyone understood what it really was. It was a targeted attack designed to make cross-border e-commerce unworkable, to force Amazon and other retailers to absorb massive new costs, and to demonstrate that the administration could weaponize trade policy against specific companies. At the same time, the IRS, under direct political pressure, launched an aggressive audit of Amazon's tax structures, threatening the company with billions in retroactive penalties. State governments, emboldened by the federal stance, began piling on their own investigations and fees. The message from Washington was unmistakable. We can make your life very difficult, and if you don't bend, we will break you. But here is where things get interesting, because Amazon didn't bend, and Canada was ready. Mark Carney had been watching this tension build for months. He understood that Amazon's greatest vulnerability was also its greatest strength, the speed and efficiency of its logistics network. The company had built an empire on the promise of two-day delivery, of seamless ordering, of a system so reliable that consumers barely thought about it, but that system depended on predictability. It depended on knowing where products would be, how long they would take to move, and what the costs would be. Trump's border fee shattered that predictability overnight. Suddenly, a package that used to cost Amazon $3 to ship from a Canadian warehouse to an American customer cost $18. Multiply that by millions of packages, and you are looking at billions of dollars in new costs. That would either destroy Amazon's margins or get passed directly to consumers. Carney saw the opening and moved with a precision that still has American policymakers scrambling to understand what happened. He didn't just offer Amazon a better deal, he offered the company a complete alternative ecosystem. Vancouver and Toronto would become the new logistics hubs for all of North America. Not satellite operations, not secondary facilities, the primary infrastructure. And here is what he put on the table. Zero taxes on fulfillment operations for 10 years, guaranteed and locked in by federal law, so no future government could reverse it. Expedited, permitting for warehouse construction, cutting timelines from 2 years to 6 months. Dedicated freight rail lines connecting the ports of Vancouver directly to the new facilities subsidized by the Canadian government. Partnerships with Canadian customs to pre-clear shipments, eliminating delays. And here is the kicker. A bilateral agreement that allowed Canadian-based shipments into the United States to bypass Trump's $15 fee entirely by classifying them under existing trade frameworks that predated the new tariffs. In other words, Carney built a system where Amazon could operate more efficiently out of Canada than it ever could inside the United States. Not because Canadian workers were cheaper, they weren't. Not because Canadian infrastructure was better, it wasn't. at least not yet. But because Canada offered something the United States no longer could, certainty, predictability, a government that understood that if you want to attract the most powerful companies in the world, you don't threaten them, you make their lives easier. And Amazon took the deal. Now, if you are sitting in Seattle right now, or in any of the dozens of American cities where Amazon operates massive logistics operations, you are probably starting to feel the consequences, even if you don't fully understand why. Let me walk you through what this looks like on the ground, because the human cost of these shifts is always the part that gets left out of the headlines. Meet David. He is 42 years old, lives in Kent, Washington, just south of Seattle. For the past 8 years, he has worked in one of Amazon's largest fulfillment centers, a sprawling facility the size of 28 football fields. His job is in the outbound department managing the flow of packages from the warehouse floor onto the delivery trucks. It is physical work, 10-hour shifts, a lot of walking, a lot of lifting, but it paid $23 an hour with full benefits, overtime opportunities, and a schedule predictable enough that he could coach his daughter's soccer team on weekends. 6 months ago, David started noticing changes. Fewer trucks arriving in the morning, entire sections of the warehouse sitting empty, managers quietly reassigning workers to different departments or cutting shifts without explanation. Then came the memo. The facility would be scaling back operations by 40% over the next year. No layoffs yet, the memo said, but restructuring was necessary to optimize the network. David has been around long enough to know what restructuring means. It means his job is on borrowed time. What David does not know, because Amazon has not publicly announced it yet, is that the vast majority of the volume his facility used to handle is now being routed through two massive new centers in Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. These facilities, which broke ground less than a year ago, are now operational and ramping up faster than any logistics project in Canadian history. Products that used to ship from Kent to customers in Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and even parts of California are now coming from Canada. Because even with the distance, even with crossing an international border, it is cheaper and faster for Amazon to operate out of Vancouver than to deal with the regulatory chaos, tax uncertainty, and political hostility it faces in the United States. Think about this for a moment. Amazon is choosing to ship products an extra 300 miles across a national border rather than operate inside the country where most of its customers live. That is not a logistics decision. That is a vote of no confidence in the stability of the American business environment. And David is paying the price. He has already lost 12 hours a week of overtime. His paycheck is down nearly $400 a month. His wife works part-time at a grocery store, but her hours are unpredictable. They have two kids, one in middle school, one starting high school next year. The mortgage payment is $2,100 a month. They were managing before barely. Now they are not. David has started looking for other work. But the problem is that Amazon is the largest employer in the region. When Amazon scales back, there is nowhere else to go. The entire local economy is built around the fulfillment center, the gas stations, the fast food restaurants, the convenience stores. All of it depends on workers like David having steady paychecks. When those paychecks shrink, everything else starts to crumble. Now, let me show you the other side of this story because it is not enough to see who is losing. You also need to see who is winning. Meet Jasmine. She is 31 years old, lives in Surrey, British Columbia, about 30 minutes outside Vancouver. 3 months ago, she was hired by Amazon to work in one of the new fulfillment centers that just opened. Her job is almost identical to David's, managing outbound logistics, coordinating the flow of packages. But here is the difference. Jasmine is making 28 Canadian dollars an hour, which works out to about $21. That is slightly less than David's wage. But Jasmine does not pay for health insurance. That is covered by the Canadian system. She does not worry about losing coverage if she switches jobs or gets laid off. Her commute is 15 minutes because Amazon built the facility in an area with good public transit and subsidized a new bus line. The facility itself is state-of-the-art with climate control, ergonomic workstations, and break rooms that actually feel like places you would want to spend time. Amazon designed it that way because Carney made it a condition of the tax incentives. If you want the benefits, you build a facility that treats workers well. Jasmine is also part of a hiring wave that is transforming her entire community. The Surrey facility employs 3,000 people, and Amazon has committed to expanding it to 5,000 within 2 years. The ripple effects are everywhere. New apartment buildings going up to house the workers, a child care center opening next to the facility, subsidized by the provincial government, restaurants and shops filling in around the transit station. For the first time in years, young people in Surrey are staying instead of moving to Vancouver for work. Jasmine's younger brother just got hired in the IT department at the same facility, starting at 65,000 Canadian dollars a year. Her best friend from high school is training to be a shift supervisor. This is what economic momentum looks like, and it is happening in Canada while it drains out of the United States. But the story gets bigger because Amazon is not alone. Once the largest e-commerce company in the world made the move, every other retailer started running the same calculations. Walmart announced it would be building two massive distribution centers in Ontario. Right along the highway corridor between Toronto and Montreal, Target, which famously failed in its first attempt to enter Canada a decade ago, is coming back, but this time as a logistics base for North American operations. Shopify, the Canadian e-commerce platform, is expanding aggressively, hiring thousands of engineers and operations staff. Even smaller players, companies you have probably never heard of, are relocating their warehousing and fulfillment operations to Canada because the math just works better. And here's the part that should terrify anyone paying attention to the American economy. These are not just warehouses. They are the nerve centers of modern retail. When you move the logistics infrastructure, you move everything that depends on it. The tech jobs that optimize the algorithms, the data centers that process the orders, the financial operations that handle the transactions, the customer service teams that resolve the issues, all of it follows the warehouses. Because in the modern economy, the physical and the digital are inseparable. What this means for you, whether you realize it yet or not, is that the entire retail experience is shifting. You have probably already noticed that your Amazon deliveries are taking a little longer. That is not a coincidence. It is because your package is traveling farther, crossing a border, dealing with customs, even if that process is streamlined. You have probably noticed that prices on certain items have crept up. That is not inflation. That is Amazon passing along the costs of operating in a more complicated, more hostile environment. And if you live in a place like Kent or any of the other logistics hubs that used to be central to Amazon's network, you have probably noticed that the economic energy in your community feels different. Fewer cars in the parking lots, fewer help wanted signs, a sense that something fundamental has changed, even if no one is talking about it directly. Now let's zoom out and look at what this means structurally, because individual stories like David's and Jasmine's are important, but they are symptoms of a much larger realignment. For decades, the United States has been the undisputed center of global commerce, not just because of the size of the market, though that mattered, but because of the infrastructure, the ports, the highways, the railroads, the airports, the legal systems that protected contracts, the financial networks that facilitated transactions, the political stability that made long-term investments safe. Companies built their entire operations around the assumption that the United States was the most reliable place to do business. But Trump has shattered that assumption. When you impose a $15 fee on packages from your closest ally and largest trading partner, you are not protecting American workers. You are telling every company in the world that the United States is willing to weaponize commerce for political purposes. And once companies believe that, they start hedging. They start building redundancy. They start moving critical operations to places where the rules are clear and consistent. Canada has become that place. Not because it is perfect. It is not because it is larger or richer or more innovative. It is none of those things, but because it is stable. Because Mark Carney understands that in a world where the United States has become unpredictable, stability is the most valuable commodity a country can offer. And the consequences of this shift extend far beyond Amazon. Think about what happens when the logistics backbone of an economy relocates. First, you lose the direct jobs, the warehouse workers, the truck drivers, the facility managers. Then you lose the adjacent jobs, the people who built the warehouses, who maintain the trucks, who supply the packaging materials. Then you lose the service jobs, the restaurants and gas stations and hotels that depend on all those workers. And then eventually you lose the tax base because when employment drops, property values fall. When property values fall, local governments have less revenue. When local governments have less revenue, they cut services, schools, libraries, road maintenance, all of it degrades. And once that cycle starts, it is incredibly hard to reverse. This is what is happening in Seattle right now. Amazon is not leaving the city entirely. The headquarters is still there, at least for now. But the company is quietly, systematically shifting its operational center of gravity north. And Seattle, which built its modern identity around being Amazon's home, is discovering that identity can be taken away. The political dimension of this moment is also worth examining because it reveals something essential about how power works in the modern world. Trump believed and probably still believes that the United States has so much leverage over companies like Amazon that they have no choice but to comply with whatever demands he makes. He thought he could bully the company into submission, force it to change its behavior, make it bend to his will. But he miscalculated. He failed to understand that in a globalized economy, even the largest companies have options, and when you make their lives difficult, they exercise those options. Carney understood this. He understood that Amazon was not loyal to Seattle or to the United States or to any particular place. Amazon is loyal to efficiency, to profit, to growth. And if Canada could offer a better environment for those things, Amazon would move. Not out of spite, not out of ideology, but because the math demanded it. This is the same dynamic playing out across multiple sectors: steel, automotive, technology, pharmaceuticals. In every case, Trump has assumed that economic dependence flows in one direction, that Canada needs the United States more than the United States needs Canada, and in every case, Carney has proven him wrong by simply making Canada a better place to operate. But let's not pretend this transition is painless. For every Jasmine thriving in Surrey, there is a David struggling in Kent. For every new facility opening in Ontario, there is an American warehouse sitting half empty. And the people caught in the middle, the workers who did everything right, who showed up, who worked hard, who believed in the system, are the ones paying the price for decisions made in boardrooms and political offices far away from their lives. You deserve better than this. You deserve leaders who understand that economic policy is not a game, that trade wars have real casualties, and that when you destabilize the business environment, workers suffer first and longest. The broader implications of Amazon's move extend into areas most people are not even thinking about yet. Consider what happens to innovation. Amazon does not just ship packages, it invents new ways to ship packages. It develops robotics, artificial intelligence, logistics software, delivery drones. All of that research and development happens near the operational centers. When those centers move to Canada, the innovation moves too. Canadian engineers will be the ones solving the next generation of logistics problems. Canadian universities will be the ones attracting the research funding. Canadian startups will be the ones building the tools that integrate with Amazon systems. The United States will not lose access to these innovations, but it will lose the economic benefits of creating them. The jobs, the patents, the expertise, all of it will be somewhere else. Real estate markets are already feeling the pressure. In Seattle, commercial property owners are watching vacancy rates climb. Office space that was supposed to house Amazon contractors is sitting empty. Apartment complexes that were built anticipating continued growth are offering concession after concession to attract tenants. Meanwhile, in Vancouver, you cannot find an available apartment. Rents have surged. Construction cranes dot the skyline. The city is experiencing the kind of boom Seattle had a decade ago. And it is not just Vancouver. Smaller cities across Canada are competing to become the next logistics hub. Winnipeg is pitching itself as the gateway to the American Midwest. Halifax is emphasizing its deep water port and proximity to Europe. Calgary is leveraging its cheap energy and central location. Every region sees the same opportunity. If Amazon is willing to bet on Canada, other companies will follow. And when they do, the economic benefits compound. The workers in these new facilities are not just earning paychecks. They are building skills, gaining experience, creating networks. 10 years from now, when some of them start their own companies or move into leadership positions, they will remember where they got their start. They will hire locally. They will invest locally. That is how economic ecosystems are built, not through one big decision, but through thousands of smaller decisions that all point in the same direction. Meanwhile, American workers are being told to be patient, to wait for the trade war to deliver results, to trust that the chaos will somehow resolve itself in their favor. But patience does not pay the mortgage. It does not put food on the table. It does not stop the foreclosure notice from arriving in the mail. And the most frustrating part is that none of this had to happen. Amazon did not want to move. The company spent billions building infrastructure in the United States. It has deep relationships with American suppliers, American workers, American communities. Moving is expensive, disruptive, risky, but it became less risky than staying. When you create an environment where companies cannot predict what the rules will be from one year to the next, where political leaders treat major employers as punching bags, where tax policy is weaponized for personal grudges, you force those companies to make choices they would rather not make. And once they make those choices, once they commit billions of dollars to new facilities in new countries, they do not come back just because the political winds shift. Think about what message this sends to every other company watching. If Amazon, one of the most powerful corporations in history, cannot operate safely in the United States, who can? If Seattle, one of the most successful tech cities in the world, can lose its anchor employer, which city is safe? The signal is clear. Political stability matters. Regulatory predictability matters. And right now, Canada offers both in ways the United States does not. The tax implications alone are staggering. Amazon is one of the largest taxpayers in Washington state, not because it wants to be, but because it has to be. When operations shift to Canada, so does the tax base. Washington loses revenue, British Columbia gains it, and that revenue difference compounds over time. It funds schools, roads, healthcare, all the things that make a place livable. When you drain that revenue, you drain the future. Local governments in the United States are starting to panic. They are offering new incentives, trying to convince Amazon to stay, to expand, to invest, but they are negotiating from weakness. Amazon knows it has options, and when you negotiate from weakness, you make concessions you cannot afford. Canada is not making concessions, it is making investments. There is a difference. A concession is giving something up out of fear. An investment is putting resources into something because you believe it will grow. Carney is betting that if Canada builds the best logistics infrastructure in North America, the companies will come, and the bet is paying off. But we should also be clear-eyed about what Canada is risking. By tying its economy so closely to Amazon and other massive corporations, it is creating dependencies of its own. If Amazon decides 10 years from now that Mexico or Vietnam offers a better deal, Canada will face the same reckoning the United States is facing now. The difference is that Carney seems to understand this risk and is trying to build diversification into the system. He is not just attracting one company. He is building an ecosystem that can survive even if one player leaves. American policymakers, on the other hand, seem to believe that dominance is permanent, that companies will always come back, that the United States is too big to fail. But history is full of empires that believe the same thing right up until they were not empires anymore. The final piece of this story is about you, about what this means for your life, your community, your future. If you work in logistics, in retail, in any industry that depends on the smooth flow of goods, you are already feeling this shift. Your hours might be cut, your wages might stagnate, your job might disappear entirely. And when that happens, you will be told it is because of automation or globalization or market forces beyond anyone's control. But that is not the whole truth. The truth is that political choices created this situation. The decision to attack Amazon, the decision to impose border fees, the decision to prioritize short-term political wins over long-term economic stability. All of it was a choice, and you are living with the consequences. Canada did not steal American jobs. Canada created an environment where jobs could thrive. When workers in Surrey are succeeding, it is not because they took something from workers in Kent. It is because their government made different choices that prioritized stability over chaos, that treated major employers as partners rather than enemies, that understood the global economy does not care about national pride. You deserve leaders who make those kinds of choices, leaders who understand that when you destabilize the business environment, workers pay the price, leaders who recognize that economic security is not about building walls or imposing fees. It is about building systems that work, that last, that give people the foundation they need to build lives.